Happy birthday to you, an appropriate tune on Sunday the 1st of July when the Isle of Man Steam Railway celebrated its 100th birthday. For the next 30 minutes or so, Manx Radio presents a special feature dedicated to the Isle of Man Steam Railway to mark this historic occasion. The Centenary special left Port Erin on Sunday afternoon at 3:45, and we join now Ian Cannell with his description of the scene.
Today is the 1st of July 1973. And you might think that's not a particularly significant date. If you were clever, you might say it was the second Sunday after Trinity, or just the start of the second half of 1973. But for the Isle of Man Railway Company, this is a very auspicious date indeed. Today, the railway celebrates its centenary, the 100th anniversary of the first passenger train journey in the Isle of Man. As you might expect, the event is being marked in the traditional way, with a celebration run in a special train, with bands and with bunting, speeches of congratulation and general rejoicing. I'm speaking to you from Port Erin Station, and it is from here that shortly the Centenary Special will travel the 15.5 remaining miles of the railway to Douglas. Manx Radio will be travelling with it, and we shall be bringing you sound effects, interviews, all sorts of information of this historic trip. In Port Erin Station, the place is en fete for the day. Crowds of people all over the platforms and under the canopies of the railway station, this red brick building which was constructed in 1903 and which today is clad with bunting of all colours. The flagpoles down the centre of the platform carrying the three legs of man, the Manx flag, and further along the platform a display of motor cars belonging to members of the Manx Classic Car Club. These, I suppose, were the railway's early competitors, the early motor cars which travelled around the Isle of Man, and we've even got one of the Isle of Man Road Services buses dating back to 1928 and looking very different to those which we see on the road today. Well, we've got the band of the 14th, 20th Hussars playing here in their dark blue uniforms, their red-topped caps and their gold braid, lending an air of pomp and ceremony to the occasion, and crowds of people, and in the car park behind the station here, row upon row of motor coaches which have brought visitors and locals alike to Port Erin Station for this historic event in the life of the Isle of Man Railway Company. Well, very shortly the Centenary Special will leave Port Erin on what is now the longest remaining operational steam railway in the British Isles, 15.5 miles from Port Erin to Douglas. The train will be drawn by locomotive number 13, Chiswick, driven by John Elkin, the man who last year in August drove the royal train carrying Her Majesty the Queen from Castletown to Douglas. He has Charlie Crellin as his fireman, and behind this 11-coach train is the banker engine number 10, G.H. Wood, driven by Geoffrey Kelly, assisted by John Smith as his fireman. The station master at Port Erin, Bobby Cowan, will act as guard on the Centenary Special train, and now in a very few moments indeed This great train will leave Port Erin. It will stop at the various stations en route to Douglas, being greeted by the chairman of the various local authorities who will join the train, which is carrying His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor, incidentally, and then there will be a speech of welcome at Douglas Station, and great rejoicing will take place there. We shall be telling you about that when the train arrives in Douglas. Meantime, let's get aboard the Centenary Special here at Port Erin.
Just before we all climbed aboard the Centenary Special for the return trip to Douglas, Manx Radio's roving microphone at Port Erin interviewed various personalities who were present for this historic occasion. Firstly, Bill Crisp spoke to the chairman of the company, Mr. J.M. Kane.
Actually, first of all, Mr. Kane, what's the future of the railway as a mode of transport?
As a mode of transport, I'm afraid there's none. But as a tourist attraction, that is what we are trying to build up, so that this can become a very necessary tourist attraction for the future for the Isle of Man.
What about the Ramsay and Peele lines? Is it possible they could ever be restored? What's going to happen to them?
Well, they're not an economic proposition these days. It is a matter now of the government are hoping to buy these lines, and eventually they know what they're going to do with various parts of them. I hope that some of the lines will be sold to the landowners each side, and therefore they'll be able to take that part in. But on the other hand, you've got the Bishop's idea that it should be made into a footpath. Now, what will be the outcome decided by government, I do not know and could not forecast even.
Well, why was the Douglas to Port Erin line chosen as opposed to the others?
Well, now, at this stage and today, and even for 2 years back now, the people that have decided on the Port Erin line being used were the Tourist Board, and we are carrying out their wishes in the matter. You will remember that in the debate in Tynwald, Mr. Nivison, a member of the council, put forward the scheme that we might be able to open the Peele line instead of the Port Erin line. It wouldn't be so long, and might be just as good from a tourist point of view. But on the other hand, it'll be up to the Tourist Board to decide which line to use.
What are the main worries for the company in the immediate future as regards keeping the railway running and in working order?
Well, it's the economics of it. We are, as you know, we are subsidised by the Isle of Man government to run this train. Without it, of course, we couldn't even think of keeping it going. And it's only the government and the Tourist Board who are putting this into action that we are able to run the train at all.
Now, what about staff? Obviously, a lot of the men who've been with the railway for many, many years are sort of reaching retiring age. Do you find problems finding staff, even for seasonal operation?
That is our problem, and we have to thrash this out with the Tourist Board, whether we are going to run a short term or a long term. If we run a short term, we cannot get staff, because nobody is going to take a job on the railway just to run it for a year or two. Really, this wants to be looked at as a long-term policy to run so that staff can be engaged and will have some future in their welfare. And yes, that's all I can say about that.
Well, finally, on closing, what about the turnout today? You're satisfied with the number of people that have
We are very satisfied with the turnout at Port Erin, and really at the other stations too. They have been taking a great interest in the railway. But of course, running the railway is purely an economic proposition, and we have to go by the fact of how many people want it and what they're willing to pay for it. And with that, I cannot say anything more, but I do hope very sincerely that ways and means will be found for the continuation of the railway for many, many years.
Well, we hope so. Mr. Kane, thank you very much.
Yeah.
An important man, of course, on this occasion was the driver of the Centenary Special, John Elkin. Whilst at Port Erin just before moving off, I took the opportunity of talking to John, and I asked him first what sort of a trip the Centenary Special was going to be.
Oh yes, I hope we have a nice trip back.
How long have you been with the railway?
12 years.
Which makes you now the senior driver, doesn't it?
Yes, senior driver now. Yeah.
What sort of preparation has gone in for the special train? Has there been a lot of work on it?
Well, there's been lots of work on the coaches, the engines, of course. This engine has just had a new boiler refitted, so there wasn't much work wanted doing on this one, but we've upholstered lots for the coaches.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the works of the engine here. Just describe it for us.
Well, it's a 240 tank engine, steam, of course, and well, you can pull up to 7 coaches, one engine, speed about 25 mile an hour.
What about some of the controls here? Just tell us about these.
Oh well, you've got your main thing is your regulator. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to move. And then it's your reversing lever, forward and in reverse. And then your get water cocks there for putting water out of the tanks into the boiler. That's about the lot, really.
Yeah.
And of course your firebox.
Yeah. Well, how much coal would you use sort of on a journey from here to back to Douglas?
Well, on the return trip, you'd use about half a ton, about 1000 weight.
Yeah. So your partner, the fireman, has kept pretty busy.
Oh yes, he's kept shoveling. Yeah.
Now on the way back, we've got to stop at each station, haven't we? It's a very long train. I think 11 coaches. Is this going to be difficult to judge stopping at the right place? It's a long one, isn't it?
Yes, because we'll be round some of the curves, and you won't be able to see what coach you're wanting to stop in the middle of the station. But I hope we'll manage all right, anyway.
What time did you start today? Start work?
8 o'clock this morning.
So you did a couple of runs earlier, did you?
I done one run this morning. Yeah, 10 o'clock out, back in at 1:15.
And now this special.
Oh, the special. Well, we hope to be in for about 5:10, 5:15.
John, thanks indeed for talking to us, and we look forward to having a nice, comfortable ride back to Douglas.
Right, thank you very much, Peter.
And so we climbed aboard the Centenary Special from Port Erin to Douglas, and the scenes at Port Erin were really tremendous, with hundreds of people really excited and cheering as the train pulled away from the platform. And now let's rejoin Ian Cannell aboard the train for some interesting information about the connection between Port Erin and steam trains.
Well, here we are now aboard the Centenary Special, and at the time of speaking, we're actually travelling parallel to the main Douglas to Port Erin Road in the Colby area, with clouds of steam now drifting out over the fields between the railway line and the main road. And everywhere we're going, the hedges are lined with spectators. The cattle are running away at the unaccustomed sound and sight of a railway going past on a Sunday, and really there is a tremendous sense of occasion. Now, we've left Port Erin station, and although the Port Erin wasn't open to traffic until the 1st of August 1874, which was not the start of the railway, Port Erin does have the distinction of having the first steam locomotive on the island. In October 1864, the Isle of Man Harbour Commissioners began the construction of a new protective breakwater at Port Erin. A 4-coupled well tank locomotive built by the company of E.B. Wilson and Company of Leeds in 1853 was used to move materials, notably the 15-ton concrete blocks, of which the 950 feet long breakwater was constructed. The locomotive, named Henry Brougham Lock after the governor at that time, ran on 7-feet gauge tracks. It was later purchased by Isaac Watt Bolton of Ashton-under-Lyne and placed in his second-hand locomotive works. The breakwater itself took 12 years to complete, but survived only 5 years before collapsing during a tremendous storm in 1881. A further storm in 1884 completed the destruction, and the remains of the breakwater have lain in disarray to this day. Well, as I said, we're travelling along this line from Port Erin to Douglas, and it's now the longest operational steam railway in the British Isles. and the only remaining 3-feet gauge railway in the British Isles. And as I'm speaking to you, we are coming to a halt at Colby Station, where the station is crowded with spectators who've all turned out to see this historic occasion, this historic journey of the Isle of Man Railway, all waving gaily to the train as it goes past. Well, except for the Foxdale line, which has a uniform gradient of 1 in 49, the steepest gradient on the whole Isle of Man railway system is on this Port Erin line. It's a gradient of 1 in 60, and it's just north of Santon Station. And this is also the area of the highest point on the line. That's near Port Greenock. The lowest point between Port Erin and Douglas is at Castletown. The railway's narrowest cutting is also on the Port Erin line. This is the Oak Hill cutting near Port Sodrick, where the width is just about 12 feet between the rock faces, and the rolling stock is about 9 feet wide overall. There is also humour associated with the Port Erin line, and the story goes that an old man from Castletown decided to follow his son, who had emigrated to New Zealand. He started his journey by travelling by train to Douglas, where he was greeted by his friend, the station master. The station master inquired if he was going across. Yes, said the man, and explained that he was going a lot further. Well, said the station master, it's a long way to Auckland, Harry. Take care of yourself. And Harry replied, yes, it's a long way, but thank God the worst of it's over. Well, I don't know about that. We're enjoying our trip on the Isle of Man Railway. At present, stationary in Colby Station, and we wait for the journey to Douglas to resume in a few moments.
Along the way, many people wore the full traditional Victorian costume to celebrate this historic occasion. During the course of the journey, Bill Crisp took the opportunity of talking to a well-known Colby couple, Mr. and Mrs. John Quilliam, and asked John, first of all, to describe his costume.
It's all according to how you want to describe the ordinary striped pants of the day, which they used 100 years ago. Of course, I wasn't on this earth at that period, of course. The waistcoat, the black waistcoat with the watch chain. Unfortunately, this is not gold, I'm not wealthy enough. And the old watch of the day, the silver type. The Manx clay cutty, or the clay pipe, which I'll have a little draw off if you won't mind. Now, this is typical of a Manx-made clay pipe. It has on it there the tanned organs, or better known as the scallops, and it's the shape off on the shank to the queenies, or the small ones. This clay pipe came from Port St. Mary, and it's, I think, about the same age as the railway. They were made about 100 years old. Very good.
Now then, can we move over and have a chat with the good lady wife, Mrs. Quilliam? Hello to you.
Well, fast am I.
Could you describe your costume to our listeners?
Well, I have a white lace skirt on, which has quite a number of layers to
Yes, I
it.
can see that,
the lace, and it's about 120 years old. And I'm wearing a pink blouse with lace and a black lace headdress and a black bearded cape, which is about 120 years old. I'm also carrying a parasol.
This is another name for, I suppose, for a sunshade.
For a
isn't it?
sunshade.
Yes.
This is older than the railway,
Yes.
and I'm carrying a fan. Yes.
Now, can I ask you, where did you both obtain your costumes from? Are they old family
They're
heirlooms?
ours,
Or?
yes, yes.
So they've been in the family for quite some time.
Yes, most of them have been. There's certain little bits that we've had to have because the other ones were more or less gone to shreds, and we've had to. But these are still the ancient or the old last century dresses.
Now, the suit you're wearing, Mr. Quilliam, looks almost brand new. It must have been really very well looked after.
It has been extremely well looked after, and that's why I pride myself in it. Of course, this top shiner, it has a few marks on it, as you can see, but this has been done by being used by someone doing conjuring, taking the rabbits out of the hat. And nevertheless, it's worn well and looks quite well.
Now, how much would a suit that you're wearing cost in those days?
They were fairly dear, but not compared to the prices today. An ordinary suit would be about £7.10.
So you think you'd have to have been a man of means in those days to afford it? a suit like that?
Of this kind, you would really, yes. It has, yes, you can see the back. It's a swallowtail, and it has the buttons on it that goes to a point. Pocket in be underneath for putting your handkerchief in, and so on. The waistcoat has 4 pockets attached to it here. The trousers, of course, are for more modern type, not to say quite the same, the striped lines.
Along closing, how would you both feel if this about wearing this sort of outfit every day if it was back in fashion?
I'd be delighted with this one. It's comfortable, it looks nice, it comes down well over your back. In other words, it covers your bottom, and it trails down to your knees. It gives you a little bit of shelter on the
Would
knee
you
part.
find it a bit hot on a very hot day?
It would be,
Bit
yes.
warm for you.
Of course, you could always take the waistcoat off, but it wouldn't look quite so nice. I must point out that the shirt is the flannel type, and not like the cotton and nylon ones we wear now to match the butterfly collar type. They did use, apart from the butterfly collar, they used the high drain pipe one, which held up the chin, and but this is the most comfortable because your throat or the throat bone comes out between the opening of the fly part of the
What
collar.
about Mrs. Quilliam? How would you feel about wearing this
Apart from
costume?
the washing.
How would you
it's
manage
quite
your housework in it, though?
Pardon?
How would you manage your housework in it? Do you find it a
I
bit
don't
difficult
know, I
to
get
move around
used
the
to it, I
house?
suppose, you know, but I'd rather the shorter skirts, I think.
Anyway, you're both enjoying yourselves today.
Oh, very much.
Certainly are, yes.
But
And so the train proceeded from Colby to Ballabeg. And perhaps this is an appropriate time now to join Ian Cannell for a short history of the Isle of Man Steam Railway.
Having just stopped at Ballabeg Station, it's interesting now to look back at some of the railway's beginnings. At least 3 tentative efforts were made towards starting a railway in the mid-19th century. There was even a suggestion in 1867 that the English Furnace Railway should build a branch line here. On the 21st of April 1870, a meeting was held in St James's Hall, Douglas, attended by persons who were interested in projecting the railway. The idea was to link Douglas, Peele, Ramsay and Castletown, with a future extension to Port Erin, where it was anticipated there would be a regular steamer service to Holyhead. The Isle of Man Railway Company Limited was registered on the 19th of December 1870 with a capital of £200,000. The provisional secretary was George Henry Wood, who was later secretary and manager from 1876 to 1925, and who had today's Banker engine number 10 named after him. The first chairman was Major J.S.G. Taubman, later to be Speaker of the House of Keys. Shortly after the formation of the railway, there was a shortage of funds, and so it was decided not to proceed with the Ramsay line. An English MP, John Pender, later Sir John Pender, a railway financier, was persuaded to take a seat on the board in May 1872. He was later chairman of the company, and engine number 3, the Pender, was named after him. With his influence, other financiers joined the venture, including the Duke of Sutherland, who had the honour of having his name on locomotive number 1. He was chairman for 7 years and Pender for 17 years. Then, on the 6th of April 1872, it was announced that Messrs Watson and Smith of Bishopsgate Street, London, had been awarded the contract to build the lines to Peele and Port Erin. After several trial runs, the first official journey of the Isle of Man Railway took place on the 1st of July 1873, exactly 100 years ago today. The Duke of Sutherland was present for the occasion, taking his place in the director's saloon. The first train consisted of 12 coaches, plus 1 open wagon carrying the band of the Royal Bengal Fusiliers. The journey to Peele, including stops, took 47 minutes. In 1877, a new company, the Manx Northern Railway, was formed to build the line from St John's to Ramsay. The line was opened on the 23rd of September 1879, and passengers changed trains at St John's. Through coaches to Douglas operated from 1881. In 1883, a further company was formed to build a branch line from St John's, 2.5 miles to Foxdale, with the primary intention of providing facilities to carry minerals from the Foxdale mines. The Manx Northern Railway took the operation of this line on lease, but it never came up to expectations. In 1905, both the Manx Northern and the Foxdale Railways were taken over by the Isle of Man Railway Company, giving a total route network of 46 miles. Competition came eventually in the form of motor buses in the 1920s. In 1930, the Isle of Man Railway formed an associate company, Isle of Man Road Services, which ultimately became the principal public service carrier throughout the island. This was achieved by the acquisition of the two main competitors, Manxland Bus Services and Manx Motors Limited. As road traffic increased, so the railway became more and more of a tourist attraction, and the number of trains, at one time about a dozen a day in each direction, rapidly fell. The first closure was St John's to Peele during the winter of 1960-61, whilst the following winter the Ramsay line was closed. At the end of the 1965 season, the whole system closed down for the winter, and in January 1966 it was decided not to reopen. No trains ran in 1966 at all, but a new company headed by Lord Ailsa leased the railway in 1967 and reopened it on the 3rd of June, starting once again with the Peele line. In early 1972, the railway passed back to the parent company, which operated the Port Erin line as a government-subsidised tourist attraction. This is the situation today. The Peele and Ramsay lines are closed, and the land is to be acquired by government for purposes as yet unresolved. The remaining track, from Douglas to Port Erin, 15.5 miles of it, is the longest operational steam railway in the British Isles, and the only one remaining at 3 feet gauge.
Many ex-railway company staff turned out for this very special occasion, and one of the most interesting we found was a former engine driver, Joe Buttle. Bill Crisp talked to Joe and asked him first when he became a driver with the Isle of Man Railway.
I come first to be a driver in 1927.
And can you tell us a little about what's involved in learning to drive an engine?
Well, the main thing is to have a quick reaction on anything that comes in your way, and well, I don't know really.
Did you have any sort of basic training before you went on?
Oh yes, I had 10 years firing and 3 years cleaning before I become a fireman. My father was a freight layer before me, and we were reared in Culbane Gatehouse in Sulby. And that brought me to the railway. I was 52 years altogether,
Yeah.
with broken time after my retirement. I'd done 2 summers.
Yeah. And did the locomotives change much over the years? Were they modified or anything like that?
Yes, they were modified. Some engines had new boilers and bigger tanks put on them, and they're much better than the smaller ones.
Well, on closing, I believe there's an amusing story to do with Buttle's ducks. Can you tell us a little about this?
Yes. Every time I come into Port Erin, I was keeping ducks down in that little park here. And every time I come in, the ducks would come up to meet me to go down to feed them. And many people was admiring my ducks. And there was many photographs taken of them.
What about the painting?
Painting. Mr. Hoggett, he painted a picture of the ducks, and I believe there is still one in London.
Did you have the ducks trained to do this or what?
No, they got that used to me going down that they were coming to meet me in the finish.
Well, now let's rejoin Ian Kennell for a final piece of history about the Isle of Man Steam Railway.
Well, the Centenary special train is just pulling out of Port Soderick station now on the last stage of its journey to Douglas. And as in every other station that we've passed, crowds of people in Port Soderick, and there His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor alighted from the train and met the chairman and members of the Braddon Parish Commissioners. The Port Soderick building itself, very well preserved, clad with ivy and with fresh new red paint on the woodwork, and really looking its best for this great occasion in the life of the Isle of Man Railway Company. Behind my voice you may hear the lead engine, number 13, Chiswick, puffing away as she hauls this train out of Port Soderick station. And it's perhaps an appropriate moment to reflect that no less than 13 of the 18 locomotives which have operated on the Isle of Man railway network were built by the same company, Bayer, Peacock and Company of Gorton Foundry in Manchester. The last one to be delivered was number 16, Mannin, in 1926. The standard design was a 240 tank locomotive with inclined outside cylinders, brass bell-mouth dome and a copper-capped chimney. The engines were finished in bright green livery, recently reintroduced. The number is displayed on the chimney in brass and the nameplates are on the tank sides. The first engines to be delivered were numbers 1, 2 and 3, Sutherland, Derby and Pender, which were supplied for the opening in 1873. Numbers 4 and 5, Loch and Mona, were added when the Port Erin line was opened in 1874. Our engine today, number 13, Chiswick, was built in 1910. It ran until 1944 on the same boiler and was reboilered again in 1971, and it's run over 850,000 miles. It was named after Edward Thomas Chiswick, who was a director from 1902 to 1927 and was chairman from 1919. And in fact, we have Lady Cowley on board this train today, who is the daughter of Mr. E.T. Chiswick. The driver is John Elkin, who drove the royal train carrying Her Majesty the Queen in 1972, and he's assisted by Charlie Crellin, his fireman. The banker engine today, bringing up the rear, is number 10, G.H. Wood, and that was delivered with number 11, Maitland, in 1905. It's named after George Henry Wood, who was secretary and manager of the company from 1876 until his death in 1925. And again we have a family connection there because Mr. K.E. Tosh, the grandson of Mr. G.H. Wood, is also on the Centenary special today. Both engines carry 480 gallons of water, 1,400 weights of coal, and an engine weighs about 21 tons. During the 15.5-mile journey from Port Erin to Douglas, these two engines will between them use about half a ton of coal. Most of it will by now have been used because we are now in the area of Kerristal, just adjoining the Marine Drive, and again the same scene as we have seen all the way from Port Erin. That road is lined with motor cars. The people are out on the hedges waving gaily to this Centenary special going past. Very shortly now we shall begin the descent into Douglas at the end of this 15.5-mile run. When the real rejoicing will begin, we shall be greeted by the chairman of the tourist board, Mr. Clifford Irving, and we expect a great crowd of people, many of them dressed in the authentic Victorian costume. We shall be bringing you details of that when we arrive in Douglas, very shortly indeed now.
As the Centenary special approached Douglas, the hedges, the roadsides became thick with people, and we expected a tremendous welcome when we arrived at Douglas Station. Over once again now to Ian Cannell for a description of the arrival at Douglas.
Well, now you can hear the almost continuous blast on the whistle as Chiswick draws the Centenary special train into Douglas Station at the end of its run from Port Erin. All the way along there have been crowds and crowds of waving people, and at the entrance to Douglas Station it's been exactly the same. Now we're drawing very slowly indeed into the station itself, coming up to the repair shops on our left, the main signal box on the right, and very shortly now, any moment now, we shall be drawing into the platform where the Centenary train will be greeted by Mr. Roger Webster, the Douglas Station Master, and Mr. Clifford Irving, Chairman of the Isle of Man Tourist Board. And a momentary respite from the whistle as the train comes round the last bend into Douglas Station to be greeted by a battery of photographers, both amateur and professional, the guard leaning out of his guard's van, and now as I speak to you, coming along the edge of the slab platform under the canopy of Douglas Station, the platform canopies, which were a later addition to Douglas Station. They were added in 1905. And all along this platform now there are crowds and crowds of people, and it seems that almost every person on this platform is carrying a camera of one sort or another, either a movie camera or one which will take transparencies which will be shown for a very, very long time indeed. And here, alongside the top end of the platform, crowds of children all dressed in colourful Victorian costumes, some of the boys wearing tall dress hats. And now, ladies and gentlemen, all dressed in the costumes of the period appropriate to the opening of the Isle of Man Railway. And now, as the train draws to a halt, it will be greeted by Mr. Clifford Irving, Chairman of the Isle of Man Tourist Board.
Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman of the Isle of Man Railway Company, I am very pleased to welcome you at the end of your journey on this Centenary train. I hope that you've had a pleasant ride, and I'm glad there were no wicked fairies along the line who caused the 2 derailments experienced by your very first train 100 years ago. Today, sir, we are celebrating the splendid service the railway has given the island through the great numbers of Manx people who for many years relied upon this as their main form of transport. I have the happiest of memories of travelling on the Peele line every day for 3 years, and I believe there may be still scars on your carriages today. You have served not only the residents of the island, but many hundreds of thousands of tourists who've had the delight of a ride on your wonderful steam railway. Though today we are naturally looking back on the past, we must also think of the future. With the growth of other forms of transport, the importance of the railway as a local passenger service has obviously decreased. However, the Isle of Man Tourist Board regards this steam railway as a major attraction to our visitors, and we hope that it will be possible to carry it on for many years to come. Indeed, as the years pass, it may well become a more valuable asset to our tourist industry, for I believe its novelty and the charm of its rolling stock will appeal even more. So while we celebrate this anniversary, let us dedicate ourselves today to the preservation of this unique railway, so that in future Manx people, and perhaps what is even more important, our visitors may experience the joys of travel on the Isle of Man Railway. Sir, we congratulate you and your fellow directors on this anniversary, and we salute those who founded this railway and those, both directors and employees, who kept it going for 100 glorious years of steam.
And finally on this special programme, who better to sum up the Centenary Day than the General Manager of the company, Mr. Bill Lambden.
Well, this has been a very happy day for us. We've been very excited in every way with all that's gone on. It's been thrilling to see so many people interested in the railway. I can only hope that those who've stood by the line side with their cameras and waved, and those who've been looking on at various places en route, will now be regular passengers, because that's the way to keep the railway alive.
Thank you indeed to Mr. Lambden and his staff for the cooperation in enabling us to produce this programme. And what better way to close than once again to wish the Isle of Man Steam Railway a happy 100th birthday. This has been a special feature programme on Manx Radio celebrating the centenary of the Isle of Man Steam Railway. Our commentators were Bill Crisp and Ian Cannell, engineer in charge Charles Webster, produced by Peter Kneale. A Manx Radio special feature.